one of the first full-time students at Barry, apparently. What was that like? When I say that to you, what comes to your mind?
Student sisters, and living in the honors house. Well, this was an amazing adventure. But I would say that it was the letter that I got from Sister Arnold that asked me if I'd consider coming down to Barry. And I'm not sure exactly what all she said, but I just knew that it was going to be a great idea. And at that point of my young religious life, I had gone between Chicago and Detroit and Chicago, and on buses or a train. And so the idea of getting outside of the Midwest was very exciting. And to go to Barry was something. They knew that the theater department then was very good, and I was a drama major. So it was a privilege, really. So the sisters who lived in the honors house, the villa across the street, I know that that building is not there any longer. And so we were the ones from the north, and then the Floridians lived in Farrell Hall with the sisters
What was
in
school
the
like
south.
then? Give me an idea of what it was like going to classes, or who your friends, not specifically who they were, but what was it like being at Barry at that time?
Well, it really was kind of a culture change, because I had been in the community now like 5 years. I had entered in '66, so this was now '71. And it was the first year following the council and following the general chapter and a couple of years of transition when I was out of a habit. So I went down there in the habit on the plane, and as soon as I got off the plane, and August heat was more horrific than I ever could have imagined. But it was 4 days later that auditions began for Fiddler on the Roof. And so in finally auditioning, because being a drama major before that, I did lighting and box office and tickets and assistant stage manager and costumes and wardrobe, but never could audition or perform. And I kind of knew that was kind of the way it was going to be, I thought. And then lo and behold, to be able to be auditioning and to do very well. And so that was exciting. I have to say that a few months later, a next major part I tried out for was in Diary of Anne Frank, and I played Anna's sister, Margot. And so the sisters on campus weren't so sure about these young sisters and what we were bringing to the campus or how we were changing the order. But, and they remember, I think it was Sister Alice Joseph who said, "There's something about this. You're out of the habit and you're learning how to be a good Jewish girl." So, Fiddler, Diary, but it was a wonderful time to be in the theater department then. But also to be kind of walking a line where you had to both, you were now working. I was the only sister in the theater department besides Sister Marie Carroll, but I mean of the students. And so my hours were crazy. I loved that the theater department did not have any classes before 10 o'clock in the morning. Great respect for us night owls. And that we were late in rehearsals, and also set construction and things like that. And so I got my first pair of jeans when I was down there because of the set construction and what we were doing. So to be a part of the community, which is the theater department, was an exciting time. Pat Minow was a wonderful, happy memory and mentor during this time also. And so to be taking mostly theater courses, and from Sister Alice Joseph was the only other, and the humanities class. I think it was the first year that they had put in the humanities program. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. You'd have the head of the philosophy department starting the class, arguing with Sister Jean Lefebvre, which was more important, the philosophy or the history of the time. And we would be watching them like a tennis match, and as they would argue, and we never saw teachers arguing before. And then the next week, Sister Julie Atkins would talk about the importance of the literature at this time, how that came from that. And then Sister Myra Mark would talk about the art programs, about artists during this late 19th century, and no, it was late 18th century. And then Mary Tyndall would talk about music and how the philosophy and the history influenced musicians at the time. And then Sister Marie Carroll would do drama at the time. And so to see this integration of classes and professors talking and giving us this info, here it was my last semester of my bachelor's degree, and I thought, education is finally making sense to me. So then I had to go get a real job, but I wanted to stay. I was loving the classes so much, and classmates, people that I worked with.
And what's interesting is because you come from the arts, obviously. I mean, you have taken your vowed life, but you have brought the arts into it, and that's not what most people think of when they think of, becoming a nun, becoming a sister. And yet, I think it was Sister Pat last night was talking about how that was the great thing about Adrian Dominicans in general, is that they embraced all sorts of learning, and that you couldn't be half a person. You weren't just supposed to be a math person or, studious. You needed the arts. Something that, I mean, did you feel at that time you were sort of charting new waters at all, or?
I guess
probably
so.
Not the right way then to say that, but.
I didn't know how much you could push the envelope, they say, and what I could do. But it was Marie Carroll who said, if this is your talent, use it, And so it was exciting to be a part of the Jerome Robbins choreography of Fiddler, to be a dancer and a singer, and then to have the part of Frumacera, and to do that, and yet always to be kind of aware that you were a sister. And for many of the students, this was a different relationship, because I was a peer with them. I wasn't the teacher. And so I got to go to cast parties too. And those were the beginnings of some interesting times and cast parties, and it was fun. And to see that, when I got a phone call a couple of years ago from Dominic Herrera, who turns out is a friend of my brother's in Los Angeles, but he was, when I directed Arsenic and Old Lace as my final production, and he played the role, of, these brothers that were, Johnny, hey Johnny, and it was so great to just hear his voice again. And to know that people from those classes, I know that Nancy Frangione went on to All My Children, and so that there were, and Marilyn Laudadio did great stuff, and I was her stage manager when she directed The Birds, Aristophanes' The Birds, which was held partly using the roof of the quadrangle. It was an outdoor theater production that she created, and I learned a lot from her, her ability, and she was another student. But there was a lot of encouragement of stretching, and you had to be a part of all of the other majors' productions that year, and to know what part you could be in here, if you could audition, because you still had to be getting your own ready, or if you were going to do a small part here, box office and tickets, because your production was in rehearsal and soon to be opening, but you had to make sure that through the year you learned the techniques and tech theater, and that you learned the importance of them in creating any production. It wasn't the emphasis on being a star. No, it was teamwork.
When did you decide, which came first? When did you decide, I think I probably can guess the answer, but which came first? You decided you wanted to be in drama, or that you wanted to join a convent?
Honestly, I thought when I joined the convent, I had the application for the Peace Corps filled out and the Dominican Mother House. And the Peace Corps, because my friend from high school, Mary Friedrichs, had gone to Tegucigalpa, Honduras. Her brother had been in school with Sergeant Shriver, and he was much older than Mary. She was young in her family, but because he was his friend, he made him the director. So her parents decided, go down and live with your brother for a year. And so I got some beautiful letters from her, and I just really wanted to speak Spanish and thought that's what I wanted to do. And I also knew that I could try this out, and Peace Corps was only a 2-year commitment. And then I would know, I was afraid of being too homesick for my brothers and sisters. I'm number 3, oldest daughter in a family of 9. And I knew how much I loved those little kids and how much family life meant to me, that I was afraid I couldn't do it. But then, right at the end, literally 2 weeks before I entered, and my sister and I were going out to California to be with my mom's sister and my brother Brian, who hadn't come home that summer, so I could see him before I left, and he had orders, show this one a good time because she's got these crazy ideas of joining the convent. And so we had a fabulous 2 weeks in San Francisco, and but I came home and I decided, I was on the way out in the train station in Kansas City. It was during the first airline strike in the country, when we had to change our plans from flying to LA first and going to Disney World and Knott's Berry Farm, which I still have never been to, or take the train, and then we'd have to cut off the 3 days because that's what it would take. Anyhow, it was a marvelous time. But the day after we entered, we were taken over to Siena Heights College and told we were to...
Did you have a sign? Was there just, so why then, you like you said, you could only do, you could do 2 years there, you could always be in, enter a convent, what changed?
Well, I think that prior to that, the idea of being a sister kept coming back. And, but I wanted to do so many things. If I got married, I wanted a dozen kids. My mother wouldn't let me enter the convent after high school. She said, this girl doesn't have enough sense to come in out of the rain. She's not making any decisions. We think she's brainwashed. And mother, please. And anyhow, so she told me that I had to wait a year. And the sister sponsor that I had said, I think that's wise. I think that's good. And if it's real, it'll last. And if not, it's, it'll work out. It's good. And so I looked at her like, you're supposed to be on my side and tell my mother she's wrong, but she didn't. So I worked at Rotary International and loved working at Rotary, loved meeting people from so many other countries, which encouraged the Peace Corps. It's encouraged my speaking Spanish because there was such a large South American, Latin American branch to the organization. And but anyhow, after I finally decided, no, I think this is what God really wants me to do, and I think I would be taking advantage of the Peace Corps, so I better just make this decision because I know what I really want. And so when I made that decision, I figured I was saying goodbye to, and I thought, you can't get married and try that out. I could try this out. My parents weren't too excited about it. My father said, my father had been in the seminary. And so he said to my mom, Lucille, she won't know till she tries it out. We can let her go. But don't worry, they have rules in silence. They'll beg us to come and get her. So she'll never survive. Well, if some rules had not changed, I probably wouldn't have. That getting up at 5:10, that was probably the killer. But so when I entered...
And why the Adrian order?
Why the Adrians? Well, because I wasn't too drawn to the Franciscans I had in grade school. I figured I was in so much trouble in grade school, they wouldn't want me, but I just didn't seem drawn to them. We lived across the street from the Mother House of the Sisters of Christian Charity, and we loved their property. We cut through their grass all the time. They did not like these Murray kids, but they would call my mother and say, we have an abundance of tomatoes, could you use some tomatoes? Or we've got extra vegetables. Yes, we could do that. But, and we loved the year we got a toboggan for Christmas and had the couple of the postulants who saw us come and slide down, and we thought that was really great. It was like we sprung them from prison or something when they went down the hill on our toboggan. But they spoke German a lot, and we'd cut through their grass, and you could smell cabbage cooking a lot, and I thought, it's not gonna, I liked it the day they were making bread, but so that was something that wasn't too exciting. But the Adrian sisters, the first time I ever saw an Adrian Dominican sister, I was in 7th grade, and I was walking with 2 friends down Green Bay Road in Wilmette, and there was this place called Richard's Drive-In Cafeteria, and it was the coolest place in town. They'd advertise on the radio, and the waitress would come to your door and put your car door and put the tray on it and make your order. And well, here we are walking down the street to go get the supplies from the cheap grocery store, the 10-cent pizzas for our Girl Scout overnight, and we stop and go, oh my God, those are nuns in a car, in a station wagon. They're eating. We had never seen nuns eat up at this time. That was not allowed. And we went, let's go see what they're eating. So very nonchalantly, we are walking by their car and came back and reported to each other, they're eating hamburgers and French fries. And the nun who was driving, she was drinking coffee, but everyone else said chocolate milkshakes. We loved it. It was like, this is the order for me. I thought I was going to eat hamburgers and French, and they were eating with their fingers. They didn't eat them with the fork and knife, I just thought this was the greatest. And it's so funny as I...
Oh, yeah, okay. I'm worried about the chapel bell.
The bell.
Yeah, and now that I know, yeah.
So now we'll cut and
Yeah,
take some water.
Take some water, yeah.
It adds a little effect, though.
Very long.
Mm-hmm.
That was such a great story.
I got an in and out cue. I got an in and out cue.
No, it only rings at 12 o'clock. Oh, 10:30. At 10:25 it would have rung before the 10:30 Mass. 12 o'clock. Next it will ring at 4 o'clock. And I think that's it. I don't think it rings at 6 anymore, no.
Yeah. Oh, we saw it. Remember the bell cord? We passed it, yeah.
The bell cord is there, and they can ring it from there, and they do for different things, but there's also a timer that goes on.
Oh, so it's ringing up.
Yeah.
As when we were novices, it was always, no matter what you were, if you were the bell ringer that week, it was like, you do not be late.
Oversleep either.
That's right.
So what you saw was some nuns, some sisters behaving like regular people.
Yes. And so I knew that I really wanted to go to that new high school we heard that was being built. And across the street from me, the German sisters ran Mallinckrodt. Now, at that time, the tuition at Mallinckrodt was $90 a year. Can you imagine? And Regina was going to be opening up, and then we learned the tuition there was going to be $200 and a $40 general fee. So, okay, $240 versus $90. You're the oldest in a family where the parents want all the kids to get Catholic school. So my dad said, Nancy, with your record and you want to be across the street, it's easier, we can afford this one. But they wore what we called Depression clothes. Their uniform was long, black Oxfords and little anklets and goofy collar. We just thought it was awful. And Regina was now wearing bobby socks and saddle shoes, and that seemed so cool. And but then fortunately, so many people chose the new high school that by the end of my 8th grade class, the Mallinckrodt sisters had decided we have to close down our high school. Yes, it was a prayer answered, and I could go to Regina. And the first day of school, when the sisters, each one would, begin the class, my name is Sister Richard Mary, and she'd write her name on the board, and I was watching them, and they all walked differently, and they all wrote differently. And one, Sister Richard Mary, held her chalk wrong. I had been in trouble for holding my pen wrong all my life. And Palmer method was supposed to be held this way. And she did it with 4 fingers, and I went, my gosh, and they let her be a nun. And she held her pen wrong. There's hope for me. It's amazing. Food, this was a big issue. That which I was in trouble for, holding my pen, I couldn't get my fingers to do the way they wanted. But they were happy. And and variety of ages. And personalities came through right away. And I just thought, boy, this group is different. And if they can let you be an individual, because the individuality came through, and that to me was very important. And I didn't see that the same. I think the other communities were more German. They were more strict, and that was kind of scary to this little Irish girl, you know. And but I didn't know what it was. I just knew I didn't feel as comfortable. And but I also, as a sophomore in high school, worked with the Daughters of Charity at Marillac House on the south side, and I found that there were nuns that were social workers. Social workers? I can be social. I could work. And I thought that would be a good idea. But going down with these friends of ours whose daughter had joined the Daughters of Charity in St. Louis, they asked me if I wanted to come with them one weekend to drive down with one of their daughters, and I thought this was pretty exciting, and I just wanted to observe. Well, then Mrs. Minch says to the postulant mistress, "Nancy, talk to that one," you know. And I was like, oh no, because I didn't think they knew I was interested in being a nun, and I didn't want Eileen to know that. So when the postulant mistress came over and said, "Do you want to have a conversation?" And Mrs. Minch is going, "Yes, dear, yes, dear." And I went, "Okay." And so she says, "Follow me into the parlor." And Eileen says, "Can I go with you?" I went, "Yeah, I guess so." I was 16. And we followed her. And as Eileen taps me, she goes, "We are going to the parlor." And she just seems so officious. Anyhow, we get inside this little tiny room. And she said, "Is there something you want to say to me?" And my stomach was just going, and Eileen looks at me, and she, with her elbow, hits me right in my funny bone, and so I start laughing. Just went, and I couldn't stop laughing, and she just looked at me, and her eyebrows just furrowed and got very serious, and she said, "Obviously, you're a little young and immature for a conversation like this. I have other things to do today. Our conversation is over." I looked at her like, "Do you want my phone number or my address or any?" She didn't. So I thought, well, I learned that day, never take a friend with you to an interview. But I also learned when I was vocation director, you don't start a question, an interview out with, "Is there something you want to say?" Made a big difference how I did things. But so I thought, well, that's out. I would be too embarrassed to go back again because that was the way it was. And so then I thought, well, I guess I can always be an Adrian. But I was worried because that meant I was going to be a teacher. And I didn't know if being a teacher all my life was something I could do. I knew I had sisters in grade school who say, "I've been teaching for 47 years and I have never missed a day." And I remember thinking, oh, you should have given the kids a break. And my family thought, "Nancy, your best friends have not been sisters through your life. We can't believe you want to do this." Anyhow, so I thought, well, I'll try it out. And if I don't last, and my father gave me the longest to last, and that was 3 weeks. And my mother, 24 hours. Why was I being so selfish and making my father drive 250 miles to Adrian from Chicago when, you know, you're going to be sent home the next day? Why don't you just go across the street? They wear those same postulant outfits over there. And it's like, Mother, no, I could never do that. Anyhow.
Yeah, it's interesting because most of the sisters I have talked to, their families seem to have encouraged it, which yours is quite the opposite.
Just the opposite, yeah.
And did you ever in the years ever have a second thought, ever glance back and say, or was it just a perfect fit from the beginning?
Oh no, there were some times I wasn't sure about that fit, and you know, times, you know, like falling in love happened, and to know, is this the sign? And I was at Barry, and I remember that Pat Minoff came to me and said, Nancy, I can see the struggle. You got to make a decision. She came to see me one day, and she was nervous. I never saw Pat Minoff nervous. But I think she was hesitant about approaching me, but saying, I want you to know what I see, and I want you to make up your mind. You either be a damn good nun or a damn good wife, but make up your decision. Make your decision and go with it. And I remember being both shocked and startled and very grateful that she was able to have the courage to respond to me and to say, make up your mind. And so I, struggled with that, and to know if I was going to stay there, or if I went home at Christmas and was going to stay home and not go back. And then I met with one of the sisters who was in leadership at the time in the Florida area, because I thought I would get kicked out, killed, whatever. And she was very gentle and said, Nancy, sometimes these things happen and you've got to deal with it. God made you, and if people are drawn to you, it's something you're going to have to be responsible for. And people are going to see goodness in you, and you're going to have to decide your limits and what you can do and how to respond. So I thought, you sure? You sure you're not going to just, and so I knew I had to make some decisions at that point, and put yourself out of temptation. And but I stayed and finished the year and was glad.
One of the things that I'm so impressed with as I talk to the sisters too is, and I'm no authority on all of the orders and anything like that, but the Dominican order just seems to be so forward-thinking. I mean, they encouraged you rather than discourage you from leaving, which you might think them, oh no, you've made a commitment to God and you've got to stick with it. It just seems that this order is so forward-thinking and tolerant and open and with it, I guess. Would you agree with that? I mean, there's strictures and rules and guidelines, but...
Yes, I would. They weren't fast enough for my mother. She wanted things moving faster. I remember a letter from her one time telling me, Sister Mary Jane at our parish is now, she's a Franciscan, and she is wearing a cute blue suit at the Mothers Club meeting. One of those Adrian's going to wake up and smell the coffee. Mother, please. But, we were a little bit slower. There wasn't just change for the sake of dramatic change. There was a little bit of pace that was different in different parts of the country. And I would say I was not one of the most forward thinkers at that point who wanted all of these changes, because I was trying to just get used to the other. And I was thinking, is it because I'm out of the habit that I'm, fell in love? And then realized, no, it wasn't. It could be in corduroy, denim, or serge, or double knit polyester, that who you are is going to shine through, and you're responsible for your own integrity. And so it was challenged, but I was grateful for people along the way who did continue to encourage me or give you the decision to say, make up your mind, and you've got to choose. Nobody's more faithful than God, but you've got to choose to be in this commitment and re-choose it and re-choose it.
Speaking of changes, a part of the reason we're doing this project is because Sister Linda Bevilacqua, for example, could very well be the last sister who's president of Barry. Obviously, the numbers are dwindling, and it's looking forward to. I know this is discussed here. Sister Attracta Kelly, we've interviewed and told us we discussed. But you're getting to a point where, lay leadership may be involved now in some of these schools. What do you think about that?
I would think that I want them to know about the Dominican charism, so that continues. And and seeing where, and that may be for a while, it may be not forever. I think of how many years we had lay leadership at Siena Heights before Peg Albert came back as the president, and how welcoming we were and how great and proud we were after many years, I think since like almost 1970. So there hadn't been a sister as the president, more on the staff, but so if this happens, to know that you want people who will continue to respect the traditions and kind of carry on and the message of the charism.